Thank you very much. As most of you know, the more spontaneous something is, often the better it is. So this was not the time I was planning to speak and so on, but anyway, here we go. So I'm going to talk to you about mainstreaming the technologic singularity and the idea of doing that in universities and beyond. And basically, taking the messages of the sort we've been talking about in this meeting to a much larger audience. Now, as background, next slide, I have a history. I've been interested in the merger of humans and machines while maintaining the higher elements of the human spirit, which you might think would be challenging to do, for quite a long time. And I have been speaking on the internet and videos and TV, next slide, on such subjects as the AI physician and existential risks and their impact on medicine. Then in February, two quite tumultuous things happened. Next slide. And so one of them was that the technologic singularity was on the cover of Time magazine. Now, probably not everybody opened that particular issue of Time, and they may not have quite understood what 2045 meant and so on, but at least they were at least subliminally exposed to the idea of the technologic singularity at that moment. The other thing that happened in the same month was that the computer Watson won on Jeopardy. And it just didn't win over all human competitors by a little bit, it blew them out of the water. It was clear that if it had continued that it would have won against not only the competitors it was competing against, but all human competitors. And it was quite amazing that a computer could be this capable. And so once again, you were kind of reaching the general public in the sense that people who are not terribly intellectual or scholarly watch Jeopardy. And they noticed something was happening, and it was something momentous. They may not have understood quite the full consequences of this, but they knew that in a sense, history was being made. So my writing partner, Nikki Olson, and I decided at that moment to start writing a book, next slide, and to bring people into the picture of what this meant for medicine and for society in general. Next slide. So we've been working on a lot of different projects over the last 8 years, and many have related to technology and medicine. Next slide. And the plan was to both begin writing a book and to begin teaching a course. And this course would be the first course ever teaching about exponential technologic change, technologic singularity, and transhumanism. But in the name of the course, you can't use those terms because the average person has no idea what they mean. So you have to use more general terms. Next slide. So it is important, though, to know what we mean by the technologic singularity. This is one of Ray Kurzweil's best-known definitions of it, but in this audience, I think most of you have a concept of what it is. Next slide. But what we have called the course is Technology and the Future of Medicine. Those are all words that most people can already comprehend. And we gradually introduce them then to the idea of the technological singularity and transhumanism and exponential change in the course. Now, is this course just a rah-rah technology course with a whole lot of people who are big on technology and nothing else? Such a course would not be valid, because that's not real life. So we have a balance of technology skeptics and technology advocates, and a lot of crosstalk between those two components, and that works really well. You may wonder, technology and the future of medicine. How important is that word medicine? And well, about half of the lectures are technically not about medicine at all. So in a way, the course is about technology and the future. And so it is broadly applicable to probably every human being on the planet. Now, is there anything else out there like that? Next slide. Here is one concept of what we're doing. It's sort of like the Matrix and Neuromancer meets medicine and technology. Next slide. And so Ben Goertzel taught a summer course in 2010 on technology studies, but for whatever reason, there are no reports of what happened in that course, and the course has not continued. So as far as we know, at the present time, we are the only people teaching a course of this nature. We would like to have what we're doing replicated everywhere, and we'd like to have as many people as possible experiencing the course that we are putting on right now. And so we're creating high quality videos of the course, and we hope to find sponsors and to be able to provide the course for free to thousands of people all over the world. Just like other courses you're familiar with, for instance, the Stanford AI course and others. So that's the model that we are following, and we're very close to being there. Next slide. So this is a poster for the course. You can see how diverse the people teaching in it are. We have the best and the brightest from across our campus from about 10 different disciplines, and they're the kind of people you can't imagine how they ever got into the same room, but there's wondrous power once they are in the same room and start talking to each other. And we're very proud of this, but we would also point out that any other university could do the same thing. If you take the entire university and say, okay, who are the really excellent teachers, the really charismatic faculty, and then how many of them are pro-tech and how many of them are low-tech, and what would happen if you... It's a construct that you could create anywhere, and we would like to see it replicated 1,000 or many thousand times all over the world, based on what we're starting to do. Next slide. These are just more visuals from the course and the offerings of the course. Next slide. And some of the associated cartoons. So how can you reach out to the general public in a really big way? There are about 60 people in this room right now, and yet the messages that we're talking about are relevant to the lives of everybody on the planet. If you think of somebody living in a mud hut in Central Africa now, who has yet to make the first phone call, has never seen TV, the technologic singularity will reach even that person. So the things we're talking about here, although we feel like a limited select audience, we really represent all of humanity in this room, and it's important to reach out to a larger group. How could we do that? Next slide. Ben Goertzel has suggested the idea of a new holiday, Future Day. Now that's a simple concept. Everybody has an idea of the future. Some people believe in a cyclical future, some people believe in a linear future, but probably every human being has an idea of the future. So if you have a day commemorating the future, sort of cool because you never get there, right? So I mean, you know, you might say next year is not the future because there's still the future after next year. So you're constantly chasing something, and a new holiday would never work without visuals, tapestries, ceremonies, the full trappings that our existing holidays have. If you think of Halloween, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, all those things, it immediately conjures up in your mind visuals and smells and ceremony and what you do with family and all this sorts of thing. And to have a new holiday, you need to do the same thing. Well, what are some ideas about how one might proceed in creating that kind of tapestry for a new holiday devoted to the future and the technological singularity? Next slide. First of all, you have to engage all stakeholders. Like, if it was a holiday supported only by the 60 people in this room, it would never, ever work. So you need to find out what a whole bunch of people with differing beliefs and life experience would think about this new holiday and what they would suggest and what would satisfy them. Next slide. And one of the ways to look at how large a group of people we might reach is to look at the TV program, The Big Bang Theory. I don't see any quizzical looks in the room. I don't see anybody who has never heard of the Big Bang Theory. The reason that every one of you has heard of the Big Bang Theory is in the US alone, there's 16 million people regularly watching that show. And worldwide, it's 30 million. That show treats of all the various memes and ideas and concepts that we talk about regularly, but in a joking, non-serious way. You can't learn any science from the show, you get no truths from it, you only get playing with words. But it satisfies a very large number of people. And in theory, we could reach that same large mass, and we'd be doing a lot more than we are doing now if we could reach that large component of humanity watching the Big Bang Theory. Next slide. Now, they had a specific episode on the technologic singularity on October 1st, 2010. It's kind of a cool episode. You can go back and watch it. But what will impress you is that you will learn nothing about the singularity. You'll learn that there is such a word, but nothing else. Because, as I say, the show just makes fun of things. It's like the court jester, which in ancient times was a very important functioning person in the court. But, you know, gets the ideas across by making fun of things. But certainly, by telling the truth, we must be able to reach at least a subset of this 16 million US viewers. Why not at least try? That episode was sort of cool. Next slide, because Woz, the other founder, had a cameo role in this show, and it's well worth watching if any of you are interested. Okay, but how would we excite people about this new holiday? We have to have something that really grabs you and is really unfamiliar, that you have not encountered before. I don't know how many Hindus we have in here, and people who've lived in India and Asia, maybe not a single one. But anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the Holi festival, H-O-L-I. Next slide. This is a most remarkable, visually interesting festival where you shower everybody in your community with brightly colored pigments. And it's not just the people that you know or the people that you talk to. If there's a janitor that you never talked to because he's not in your social class, if there's a corporate CEO who had never talked to you because you're not important enough, on that day, you're all alike. You're all showering each other with these pigments. And originally, it was completely safe because all the pigments came from plants and they were all non-toxic. But if you think of getting brightly colored pigments from plants, it's kind of hard, whereas getting brightly colored pigments from paint factories is really easy. So now people are getting these pigments from very toxic sources, and what interests me as a physician is because now this festival, they get skin disease and eye disease and lung disease. You know, it's not without hazard. Next slide. But you can see it is very visually interesting. And it's unlike anything you have ever experienced. And so I don't know that we need this, but we need something like this if we're going to create a new holiday and really make it work. Let's have a look at the next slide. You can imagine what it would be like to be in that crowd. And you can imagine that you have never yourself had an experience remotely like that. And you may consider yourself a very experienced human being, but you ain't done this yet. Now, are there other things? Suppose you're afraid of the toxic nature of these things. Are there other ways to experience something like this? Well, yes. Next slide. Those of you who have been to my Facebook page, and that may not represent a very large number of you, may know that forever there has only been one poem on my Facebook page, and it's always been this one. And it's called the Crayola Bomb. Maybe we should develop a Crayola Bomb as our next secret weapon, a happiness weapon, a beauty bomb. And every time a crisis developed, we would launch one. It would explode high in the air, explode softly, and send thousands, millions of little parachutes into the air, floating down to earth, boxes of Crayolas, and we wouldn't go cheap either. Boxes of 64, with a sharpener built right in, with silver and gold and copper and magenta and peach and lime and amber and umber and all the rest. And the people would smile and get a funny look on their faces and cover the world with imagination. So that also gives you a similar idea to the Holy Festival. Some of you may have a Roomba artificial intelligence vacuum cleaner, and you're very proud of this thing, but you didn't know it would create art. Now, if you do a time-lapse photograph of your Roomba cleaning your carpets, this is what it looks like. And once again, it's a very arresting panoply of colors. And if none of these things satisfy you, there is something else, perhaps mildly familiar to you, and this is the Hot Air Balloon Festival. Next slide. So you can imagine something like this that is visually extremely arresting with very bright colors. I don't know that any of these visuals are the proper visual for Future Day. I just know that we need something like this. And the opportunity of me talking with you is maybe that one or more of you will have a much better idea than I have had about how to excite the general public, capture their imagination, move this idea forward, and get a very larger number of people thinking about the sorts of things we have been thinking about in this conference and in this room. Next slide. Now, you can think of songs or poems too, and there are a lot of different ones you might think of. This is one, Dusty Springfield's The Windows of Your Mind, round like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, on an ever-spinning reel, like a snowball down a mountain, or a carnival balloon, like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon. Next slide. Like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, and the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. It's interesting, isn't it? To some of you, those are meaningless words. You catch something in there about time, but otherwise it's blah, blah, blah time. To others of you, it's wow, wow. And so human beings are very heterogeneous in your reaction to things like this, just as your reaction to other ideas. That's because we're not an inbred species. Think of how boring it would be if we were like lab rats, all genetically the same, then we'd maybe all like the same songs. And maybe this is absolutely the wrong song, but it at least has some idea of the idea of a linear future, of a cyclical future, of time being important. These are some of the ideas that we would need to capture if there was going to be music and poetry associated with the idea of future day. Next slide. Finally, I don't know how many of you have thought about strawberries. There was a time in my life where I thought about them a great deal. In 1975, where I learned what I do as my day job, kidney pathology, I learned that in Paris, France. And that summer, I lived on strawberries. You could find them everywhere, and they don't last very long. So it's a very transient sort of experience. If you plan to live with a bunch of strawberries for a week, that's not going to work. You know, they need to be consumed quickly after you get them. They're very visually entrancing. And so the Beatles tune Strawberry Fields Forever, there's this intro. You know, what does that mean? Is that perhaps something that we could look at as an idea related to our thoughts about the future? I don't know. But I would ask you now at the end of this presentation, try to think of how you can help me. And I bet every single one of you can help me in some way. Maybe it's practical. You can think of who could sponsor the videos from the course so we can provide them free to everybody in the world. Maybe some others of you have a much better idea of how we could make Future Day work, how we could disseminate it. Maybe there's some alternative to it that would work much better. And there are others of you who can think, what does it mean that 16 million people watch The Big Bang Theory and there's only 60 people in this room? What's wrong with that picture? How can we fix it? Should we fix it? Are some of you happy to be part of a very small group, and you'd be really upset if you found suddenly there were 16 million people in here with you? So I think as heterogeneous as human beings are and as this audience is, I'm absolutely confident you can help me with what I'm trying to do. And I, in a sense, am trying to mainstream what you're doing, and I believe that's a good thing to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I had to say. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Any questions? Yes, Randall.
Not so much a question as maybe a clarification of what happened with the Rutgers course.
Yes.
Course.
I would like to know this.
Because the course was actually organized by Ted Kurtzel, so that.
Right.
He had a bunch of speakers there, people from the transhumanist community, singularitarian community, etc. I was one of them. And the problem is actually technical. They used some kind of course software that basically traps everything that we put in there in a place where you cannot get at it unless you have that same Java-based software and still have access to their passwords, etc. So it's kind of in limbo in that sense. But
yeah. Well, I'm pleased in a way. You know that if you're trying to do something that actually nobody else in the world is trying to do, it makes it seem like maybe you're headed down the wrong path. So the fact that, you know, he and I have been at different times doing similar things suggests that what I'm doing is perhaps going down the right path. And it certainly is a very satisfying experience running that course. Those of you who heard me speak yesterday, a lot of the ideas that I talked about are not specifically my own thoughts. They're thoughts that I got from what has happened in that course this past fall. It's amazingly rich, and you know that the people in the room get very excited, and it's a wonderful thing to see. We began the course at a time when our medical school was in a really kind of disrupted state, and we had a need to heal. And so this idea of bringing the tech skeptics and the tech proponents together came out of that, this idea of this sense of healing. And it has just worked very, very well. And so I'd be happy to tell any of you more about it. And if you found what I talked about yesterday of value, I'd say it's kind of an extension of the course. That's what you were hearing yesterday. Yes?
Do you offer the class lectures on YouTube yet?
some of them are there. We are giving the course again as a graduate course starting on January 10th, and we plan to have much higher quality videos. We expect to have the whole course online for free for everybody in the world approximately March or April, something like that. That's our current plan, with broadcast quality videos. That's our plan. Any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering if you've had any contact or discussions with people involved in Yuri's Night around the world. Because from the description you're giving Future Day, it reminds me most closely, as far as existing festivals, what have you, Yuri's Night, which is a worldwide celebration
Yes.
of the birthday of Yuri Gagarin.
No, I'm aware of that festival, and I have people who have gone to the festival, and I know a lot about it. There has not been any interaction thus far. I would certainly favor such interaction. It just hasn't happened yet. Any of you who don't know about Yuri's Day, I would encourage you to research that.